In this video, I hope we can all agree that we live in an engineering universe where rust is pretty much a foregone conclusion. You can make something from scratch like a gate or the tray for your ute or a brand new workbench, or you could repair your trailer or any one of 1,000 other things. And while you are working on that part, it's busily starting to rust. So I'd suggest that the least we can all do is strive to stack the deck in that component's favour so that it can deliver the maximum possible life in service. So in this report, I'm going to show you 5 different ways you can get cracking on that and protect those parts better than just conventional paint. This is part 2 of my 3-part series on busting rust. If you missed part 1, it's all about removing rust, i.e. going from something that looks like this to something that looks far more like this, is amenable to other surface finishes and longer life, blah, blah, blah. We've all got things in our shed that are rusting away, and we need to do something about that. Part 1 gets you out of the blocks. Part 3 is all about the stuff that you can't paint. So precision tools, which just wouldn't function properly if you did put 3 or 4 coats of paint on them, and machine components and things of that nature. I will link to parts 1 and 3 in the description so you can be fully up to speed on all of that. In part 2, we're going to talk about paint and paint-like treatments that you can apply to maximize life. And I'm partnering with CRC and Auto One. CRC because they are engineering Jedis, and they have a product that is designed for just about every specific conceivable engineering application. The challenge, I think, for the home gamer is to walk into a retail store and look up on the wall and see all of these products that are all purportedly fantastic and choosing the right one for your particular application. So I've kind of cut through that noise and we're down to 5. They've all got specific uses, and we'll get into that in just a second. I'm partnering with Auto One on this because for the next 2 weeks, from the 1st of August to the 15th of August at midnight 2025, you will get 25% off, which is kind of an unprecedented discount on CRC products. They don't normally do that, but they're doing it now for you. So do not fail to take advantage of this pretty incredible offer, I'd have to say. Links to the details there and all of these products in the description. Galvanization is absolutely magical stuff. At least it is according to Arthur C. Clarke's definition. Particularly hot dip galvanizing, which is when you get clean steel and you dip it in molten zinc, and the zinc sticks to the steel and then it does its magical corrosion protection voodoo. It does that for a few reasons. The first one is it functions a little bit like paint in that it coats the steel and deprives atmospheric oxygen of access. And then, after a few months, when you get a layer of sort of matte grey zinc oxide on top, it forms a hermetic seal as well and further deprives the atmospheric oxygen of any access. Okay, so there's a 2-layered sort of protection system in place there. The third mechanism obviously is galvanic protection or cathodic protection, where the zinc sacrifices itself electrolytically to protect the steel. In other words, the zinc has to go away before the steel can rust. So it's a magical process, and it gobsmacks me that it's as affordable as it is, which is why we see it everywhere, protecting steel and doubling, tripling, quadrupling its service life in many cases. So that's absolutely brilliant. I cut this piece of pipe up a few years ago now, and you can look at the cut end just there. It's not even threatening to rust. So that's incredible. And that's as a result of the cathodic protection, the electrolytic kind of protection. The other thing about galvanizing is that it almost self-heals, because if you scratch lightly a bit of galvanized metal, it'll oxidize again over the top, and that'll deprive any more oxygen of getting further access to the metal. So galvanization is great, but you have to get rid of it for fabrication, because when you weld stuff together, it doesn't weld as well as it otherwise might if it's galvanized. And the other thing is, galvanization is a tremendous health hazard to the welders if they attempt to weld through it. And that's because the zinc oxide that forms when you weld onto galvanizing, it can cause a sort of autoimmune reaction that gives you what they call in the trade metal fume fever, which makes you feel sick as a dog. And the long-term effects on that are unknown. But the other thing that does have long-term effects, which is extremely well known, is that galvanization also contains a small amount of lead. All right, so when the lead oxidizes as you weld through the galvanizing, it forms lead oxide, which you absolutely don't want to breathe because it's linked to brain cancer. So if you are fabbing up anything made of galvanized this or that, it's essential that you grind away or you burn away with acid or something of that nature the galvanizing before you start arcing and sparking. It's so dangerous to breathe the fumes, particularly in the long term. And I know all these old welders say, oh, they just drink a bit of milk and you'll be right. Milk might be a countermeasure. The calcium in milk might be a countermeasure against metal fume fever, but it's not going to do anything about the lead oxide, and that's what I'd be more concerned about with fabricating anything that's galvanized. I didn't say don't fabricate with galvanized metal. I just said grind away a little bit. Go back about 20 mil or something. Grind the galvanizing away or acid etch it away so that you're not welding through the galvanized coating, because that's so unbelievably bad for you. And this opens the door to a bit of a problem, right? What do you do to protect the bits that you've welded or the bits that you've repaired? Because, you know, someone might back your trailer into some post and rip the guard off the side of the box kind of thing, and then you've got to weld it back together. And when you do that, the welding will not be protected, and you'll end up potentially in a situation like this where so much of the galvanizing has been removed from this region that the cathodic protection able to be offered by the remaining galvanization is kind of negligible. So what do you do? And the answer is you use one of these following products, okay? I think the Coca-Cola of spray-on cathodic protection is Zinc It, okay? Zinc It has a lot of zinc in it. It's mostly zinc. It's like 95% zinc. So you spray it on and it gives you high-level protection up to something like 6 years, depending on the hostility of the ambient environment in which it operates. You don't even have to coat over the top. So this is a really clever piece of chemical engineering that does more than just paint, because it gives you the zinc-specific benefits of coating in addition to the surface sealing kind of properties as well. And if you don't like the colour of Zinc It, there's a bright version. If you want it to be more aesthetically in tune, if you like, with fresh galvanization, you can use bright zinc, which is essentially the same thing with a little bit less zinc in it and a little bit more silvery colouring, I suppose. Certainly a little bit less zinc. If you're wondering how that plays in practice, here's a little sample I prepared earlier. This is just a piece of galvanized pipe, tube, whatever. Here's your Zinc It and here's your bright zinc. And depending on the light, neither is a particularly perfect match for galvanization, but they're pretty close. Like if you want to repair something and then spray over the top, in my view, either will do, although the bright one will not give you as much environmental protection ultimately as the darker Zinc It product, okay? So if you want maximum protection and the bright colour for aesthetic reasons, then what you should do is a base coat of Zinc It and then the bright one over the top, obviously, because then you're getting a lot of zinc in total and the most protective coating right up against the base metal that you're trying to protect. So, you know, if I was going to repair my trailer or a galvanized gate, if it mattered aesthetically, I'd be doing it probably that way. The thing to remember, I think, if you're at the shop thinking about one of these two products, is that they're really only targeted at bare metal. So they're no good for anything that's already painted. I wouldn't be spraying either of these over a partly pre-painted surface because they're not designed for that. If you want something that is designed for that, I'd be going with metal armour. And see what I mean about the complexity of seeing all these things up on the shelf. There's a fair bit of zinc in metal armour as well. It's between Zinc It and Bright Zinc, closer to Zinc It, but not as much as Zinc It. Okay, so you get that cathodic dimension to the protection. But if you were painting something that you'd repaired that was galvanized and also painted, and some of the area around the repair was painted, and you just wanted to give it a base coat that was protective, metal armor, as the name implies, is that product. All right, it'll basically go over just about anything, and you don't have to have a totally bare metal surface to make it work. So bare metal for these two, pre-painted for this, absolutely no problem. You don't have to coat over the top of any of these products, but you can if you want, right? And they've given relative protection ratings to them. The metal armor is 68, the Zinc It is 72, and the Bright Zinc is 60. So metal armor is pretty close to Zinc It and a fair way away from Bright Zinc. Quite protective, but in a sense more versatile. If you want to have one spray pack in your shed to do a multitude of different jobs, protective jobs on things you repair, metal armor is probably the go. Although I know in industry, Zinc It is insanely popular. So there's that to consider. Here's metal armor up against the other two. So we've got metal armor here, we've got Zinc It in the middle, and Bright Zinc up the top here. If aesthetics matter, okay, on galvanized things like trailers, and I struggle with the concept of aesthetics when it comes to box trailers and gates and things of that nature. In fact, most things that I would make out of galvanized steel, but I suppose if there's a fence and it's out the front of your house and it's galvanized and something happens, tree falls on it, you got to fix a bit, then aesthetics do matter. And in that case, I'd be painting it immediately with some sort of cosmetic top coat, surely. So anyway, that's how they play out cosmetically. The final paint-like product I want to talk to you about is for non-ferrous, and it's this one. It's called CRC Etch 10. It's for aluminium, brass, copper, things of that nature. Those non-ferrous metals that you might be doing this or that job with in the shed. And also galvanized, because it will bond to that, although it will not provide the same zinc-type protection as the other three that we've already discussed. Etch 10's big trick, incidentally, is that it is a vinyl-based primer. So unlike a lot of etch primers that I've used, the vinyl basis does a pretty good job of sealing the surface. So you might not have to worry about sprinting down to the paint shop and coming back with some appropriate cosmetic top coat, at least right away, because of the sealing nature of the vinyl basis of the product, right? So it'll do a good job locking oxygen out of the surface, at least for a time, although it won't provide the cathodic protection with the zinc that is contained in the other three. But for non-ferrous, this might be something that you might want to stock up on, especially with 25% off currently. Now you can see the four products together here. Here's your CRC Zinc It, here's your Bright Zinc, here's your metal armor, and here is your Etch 10. Sort of side by side, that's how they play if aesthetics matter, as previously discussed. The thing about etch primer is it's good at digging into the surface you're spraying it onto, and it's also good at providing a key for the paint that goes on top. It feels nice and grippy there, not slippery at all, so it looks like it's a pretty good key for subsequent top coats. And when I get into it, this has been on there for about 36 hours now. When I get into it and have a red hot go with my thumbnail, it is steadfastly refusing to peel off the galvanizing. And all I did with the galvanizing was I Scotch-Brighted it prior to application. So it's a pretty good key by at least the standard of that very non-scientific test. There's one more product to go, however, and it's really not a paint at all. And in many ways, it's my favourite product of all three, especially if, like me, you might have a shed out the back with a whole bunch of garden tools and they're industriously turning themselves back into iron oxide as we speak. I had a crack with my aging trenching shovel just a day or so ago now, or at least half of it, as you can probably see here. And this product is rust converter liquid. And as the name implies, it's not a paint. It's something that uses what you've already got, which is rust, and it converts it into something else, which would be a polymer that seals the surface and is somewhat protective, and also a bit of a primer if you wanted to go so far as paint your garden tools. Personally, I can't see myself getting worked up enough to paint the garden tools, but you can see what a profound transformation this has been with very little effort, I'd have to say. And this is probably the best way for me to show it to you. No prizes for choosing which half got treated and which half didn't, but the transformation of this surface is just red hot, and it happens in a matter of hours. All you need to do, and all I did, was I got a busted-ass wire brush and just knocked off the loose flakes of surface contamination on half of the shovel, and then I brushed it off with a brush, and then I just slapped on a nice thick coat of rust converter. The biggest pro tip of all time with rust converter is let's not get too enthusiastic with removing the rust when you prepare the surface. The soft stuff has to come off, but you have to leave a considerable amount of corrosion behind for the chemical voodoo to do its thing. If it's bare metal, it's not gonna work. It goes on white, turns a bit green in this case, and then over the next few minutes to hours, it goes black and goes hard and shiny, and it functions as a primer and also as a protectant. To me, given the amount of effort involved, which was less than 5 minutes, I'd have to say, the result is pretty strong. And if you end up doing this every couple of years, you'll probably be able to bequeath your garden tools to your grandkids, if that sort of thing matters to you, or just protect them from the ravages of moisture, oxygen gas, and time as they sit faithfully waiting in your shed to be recalled into duty because on a whim you suddenly decide a trench through the guts of the backyard might be nice. Who doesn't want to dig one of those? I tell you what though, in terms of return on investment, if the thing being invested is your time, Rust Converter is one of the best products I've ever used. Don't forget, 25% off all these CRC products at Auto One for the next 2 weeks, ending at midnight on the 15th of August. I'll put links to all of them and full details in the description. I'd like to thank you very much for watching as well. We're all at war against rust, and we can inflict maximum pain and suffering on the enemy if we all just tried ever so slightly harder. Part 1 and Part 3 are also available to view as well if you'd like a more complete picture on busting rust, and who doesn't want to do that? They're linked in the description as well.